site that gets totally flattened. That's Beirut Port's main grain elevator. So there's real concerns about Lebanon's wheat stocks and how it's going to cope in the coming months. Since October, Lebanon's been racked by major protests and civil unrest about the economy and the financial collapse. It's already brought down one government. And with coronavirus and the worsening financial situation, the country was teetering on the brink of instability before this disaster. So now no one knows what's going to happen next.
Eric Twarchek reporting. The top stories on ABC News. Victoria has recorded its worst day of the pandemic with 15 deaths and 725 new infections. Many Victorian businesses will be forced to shut from midnight tonight, with around 250,000 workers told to stay at home. The beginning of the inquiry into breaches of hotel quarantine has been delayed in light of the stage 4 restrictions. Queensland is again closing its southern border, with the state government expressing deep concerns about a second wave of COVID-19. From 1 a.m. on Saturday, anyone living in or travelling through New South Wales or the ACT will be shut out of Queensland, with scarce exemptions being granted. Queensland residents returning after the deadline will have to fund their own hotel quarantine. A warehouse full of ammonium nitrate has exploded in Lebanon's capital, sending a shockwave that damaged buildings kilometres away. Hundreds of people remain missing and bodies are still being pulled from the rubble. Thousands were wounded and hospitals are overwhelmed. Beirut's mayor says the blast caused billions of dollars in damage. And 3,000 workers will be made redundant from Virgin Australia under the rescue plan by the airline's new owners. 6,000 employees will remain, but Virgin hopes to increase staff numbers once the market recovers. The Transport Workers Union is calling for an aviation keeper package to help the flailing industry bounce back from the coronavirus economic downturn. Police have shot a man in Brisbane's south after an officer was allegedly stabbed. Emergency crews were called to Hillgrove Street in Mount Gravatt at around 5 o'clock this afternoon. Let's go live to reporter Tim Swanston. Tim, what more can you tell us?
Good evening, Karina. Well, a major crime scene has been set up here behind me on Brisbane's south side. Now, police say that 2 officers were attending an address just up behind me when a man in his 20s, armed with a knife, attacked one of the officers. That officer is...
Our apologies. It seems as though we've lost that connection to Tim Swanston. We will try to get him back a little later. The Australian government is set to reopen a detention centre on Christmas Island in the next few weeks to avoid overcrowding in mainland facilities amid the coronavirus pandemic. The Australian Border Force says travel restrictions are preventing them from deporting foreign criminals, and it expects the facility will be needed for about 6 months. Locals are concerned it will damage the island's image as a tourism destination. The centre was last used at the start of the pandemic to quarantine Australians who were evacuated from Wuhan in China. Ullaru's traditional owners have been successful in their bid to keep tourists who flew in from a COVID hotspot 2 days ago out of the national park. Passengers will be flown back to Brisbane tomorrow, but it's alleged one of them today tried to sneak back into the park.
When Monday's flight from the recently declared COVID hotspot of Brisbane landed at Uluru, it caught the national park's traditional owners off guard. They formed a roadblock to stop the flight's 42 passengers from entering the park, which is also home to the community of Mutijulu. On Thursday, those passengers will be flown home, and all other air services have been cancelled until the end of the month.
Our directors feel that the lives of their community members are more important than making money.
Parks Australia agreed to close the park, but that didn't stop one tourist from doing the wrong thing and sneaking into the park today.
Walked into the park, bypassed the entry station, and got picked up by rangers when she twisted her ankle.
Parks Australia says they will not open the park again until traditional owners are comfortable with the travel measures put in place by the Northern Territory government. In a statement, Voyages, who operates the park's resort, says it understands the community's concerns and will continue to work collaboratively, to ensure all necessary precautions are being undertaken to protect the local community.
At this stage, after the plane leaves for Brisbane and those people have left, the park might reopen, and the people here are happy for people from safe spaces to come in and visit the park.
A moment of resolution amid ongoing uncertainty. Samantha Johnsher, ABC News.
To finance soaring gold and iron ore prices pushed the Australian dollar higher today and helped keep the share market to a fairly small drop. Here's Alan Kohler.
Gold is now firmly entrenched above $2,000 an ounce for the first time. Also, silver has surged above $26 an ounce for the first time since 2013, and iron ore is not far off a 6-year high as well. It's all partly because the US dollar is falling, and that's what the commodities are expressed in. But also iron ore is up because construction and therefore steel demand is back on in China, and supply is suppressed by Brazil's problems with the pandemic. Also, gold has really taken off in the past 3 weeks. It's up 12% since mid-July, mainly because small investors are starting to hit the panic button about the economic impact of the coronavirus. They're pouring money into gold funds as a safe haven, the biggest of which now owns more gold than a lot of countries' central banks, including Japan's, India's and Australia's. John Maynard Keynes famously described gold and the gold standard as a barbarous relic, but it's been anything but that since America freed itself from the gold standard, that is, having dollars backed by gold. As central banks cranked up the money printing presses in a big way after the GFC, and then again this year, investors have been fleeing what they think is oversupplied and degraded money. Mind you, there's a lot of hoarding of $50 and $100 notes lately, in Australia anyway. That's another group of people fleeing, in this case from banks and tax. Rising commodity prices helped rescue the share market from a bigger fall than 0.5%. Gold and iron ore miners went up, but industrials and banks all fell. There were moderate gains on most global markets, and the Aussie dollar crept towards 72 US cents. Currently, it's at 71.8. And that's finance.
Let's stick with the gold theme, and there's a gold rush happening in northwest Queensland with prospectors hoping to take advantage of those record gold prices. For the first time in history, the precious metal hit more than $1,900 an ounce last week and has continued to strengthen ever since. Eric Barker reports.
The Golden Hills of Cloncurry have delivered boom and bust over the years. But this year, gold prices have hit uncharted territory, exciting the locals who've been combing the area for generations.
There's a lot of hardship, hard drilling that produces nothing. But it's good if you know that the price of gold is that high.
The Tick Hill gold mine has been lying dormant for decades. Now there's hope it could be brought back into production this year.
In normal gold price environments, a lot of these deposits wouldn't get mined, but with the gold price having gone up so much in the last 12 months, it's completely changed the dynamics now.
Tourists are heading to Cloncurry to get a slice of the action.
What does it look like?
Wow, it's little gold nuggets, beautiful.
And they've been asking for some of the old knowledge.
They all want to know where the gold is, and they don't want little bits of gold, they want the big bit of gold, right? So you tell them the best place to go is a place called Wild Goose Creek. So you send them off on a wild goose chase.
John Walton's not the only one trying to protect his patch. Somewhere in the northwest Queensland bushland, a lucky fossicker has recently discovered a golden nugget. But the person did not want to talk through fear of uncovering their secret location. A vow of silence well known among prospectors.
You act dumb and you keep your mouth shut and say nothing.
Others are more keen to talk it up.
We think we might be at the start of a big gold boom, but anyway, wait and see.
Prospective gold diggers will need a licence from the Queensland Department of Natural Resources and Mines. Eric Barker, ABC News, Cloncurry.
Let's take you back to Brisbane now and our reporter Tim Swanston, where there has been a police shooting. Tim, just take us through the events that unfolded this afternoon.
Yeah, evening, Karina. Well, as you can see, there's a major crime scene here behind me that was set up some 2.5 hours ago. Now, police say that 2 officers were attending a property just a few doors behind me to serve documents on a man in his 20s when they say that that man has then been armed with a knife and has attacked one of the officers who's been left with significant injuries. Now, that officer is receiving treatment at a nearby hospital. Police then say that that officer's partner has then fired her weapon a number of times and shot the man about 3 or 4 times or so. That man is also now receiving treatment at a nearby hospital and is expected to survive. Now, it's of course, shocked this local community. Residents have said that there was some very significant scenes of chaos after that happened, where dozens of crews arrived into this street to then respond to that incident. Police have said that ballistic and forensic experts are going to be examining the scene tonight, but given the limited light, they'll be back in the morning to investigate exactly what's happened here, and we're expecting to get more detail from them tomorrow as to what may happen to that man who has stabbed the officer.
Okay, Tim Swanston with the latest there from Upper Mount Gravatt in Brisbane. Victorian authorities say the time for discretion is over and the statewide crackdown has begun, including increased penalties for those not complying with COVID-19 restrictions. Some Melburnians have been reluctant to wear masks, citing the mask mandate as violating their civil rights. Human Rights Commissioner Ed Santo spoke to Patricia Carvelis on Afternoon Briefing.
Nothing in the Universal Declaration on Human Rights about face masks, and the rules on face masks are very clear. They're there to keep people safe. They're there to keep the user safe. They're there to keep the general population safe. So while we understand that it's different, it's not something that we're culturally used to in Australia, and that can be challenging, it's not a breach of someone's human rights to require them to wear a face mask in a pandemic.
So how do we address this issue? Because clearly there is, and I think it's very much a minority, but there is a section of the community that feels like all of these laws, but even this very personal one, something you have to wear physically, is a violation of their individuality, their rights, their ability to kind of go freely in society. How do you take that on, and actually persuade those people that that's not the case?
I think good leadership in a crisis involves 2 very important things. First, being open, frank and candid with the people and saying, look, this is something that we need to do, and here's the reason we need to wear face masks. It's for a very important reason, and it's so important that these are rules that are going to be prescribed by law. And not kind of pussyfoot around that, make it very clear why people are doing it and that it is an important rule that people have to follow. But secondly, I think we also need to show some sympathy for the fact that this is a very difficult time. I think it would be being too literal to say, to point at individuals who are really struggling with these restrictions and say that in some way they're all bad people or all unable to participate in the community. They may be really kind of expressing what I think a lot of us are feeling, which is that in a pandemic and with stricter and stricter restrictions on what we can do, that can be very difficult. And so showing some sympathy and empathy for that, I think, is important as well.
Are you frustrated that people are using this as an excuse not to follow public health orders, that they're, citing this issue around human rights in relation to this? I mean,
look, maybe I'm going to sound like Pollyanna here, but I think any time that we talk about human rights often presents an opportunity for us to really see how they can be useful and practical in a real situation. And so that sometimes means saying, well, this is not a human rights issue, but this really is a human rights issue. So at the same time that we're having a discussion about face masks, and the Human Rights Commission has been crystal clear, I think, in backing up the federal and state governments in saying that face mask rules are completely legitimate on human rights grounds, we're also saying that governments perhaps need to be a bit more sympathetic to people who are often not the subjects of sympathy. So people in detention in particular, we have grave concerns about people in immigration detention, and we're saying that anybody who doesn't present a serious security risk should be released from immigration detention because of the particular risks that the pandemic presents for people in closed spaces like detention.
The new owner of Virgin Australia has confirmed what the airline's workers were fearing. Thousands of jobs are being permanently axed. Only 6,000 of the company's 9,000 staff will be retained if private equity firm Bain Capital gets control of the airline. For more, I'm joined by John Lyons, who's the president of the Virgin